My favorite line from the Batman movies is when Bruce Wayne gets confronted by his childhood best friend Rachel, and she says to him,
It's not who you are underneath, it's what you do that defines you.
I've always loved that line because it connects habits and actions to identity. In his book, Atomic Habits, James Clear encourages readers to adopt this kind of thinking if you really want to start a new habit. You have to see your actions as a reflection of your identity. If I want to think of myself as a runner, I actually have to lace up my shoes once in a while and get out there. And every time I do, it's kind of like I'm casting a vote for that aspect of my identity. I can say, this is who I am now. It's a robust way to develop a new good habit. Unfortunately, it also works just as strongly in the negative direction. I like to think maybe underneath that I'm not impulsive, but every time I walk through the checkout line at a store, I can't seem to keep my hands off the Butterfingers. But this can get a lot darker than chocolate bars in the checkout line, right? My past mistakes and regrets can get incorporated into my identity, and once I've crossed that line, it kind of feels like, well, this is just who I am now. Almost a decade ago, early on in my career as a pastor, I was walking through some infidelity issues with a couple. The conversations were so uncomfortable for me back then that I attempted to lighten the mood mid-conversation by making a joke. It went over like a lead balloon. What I thought was innocuous was actually inconsiderate and really insensitive, and it hurt the person that I was talking to. And it didn't just ruin the moment, it ruined a part of our relationship. And it took a really long time to recover from the damage. To be honest, I'm not sure I ever fully recovered it. And from that moment that I crossed that line, I started to believe that this is just who I am now. I guess I'm never going to be a good counselor. I'm a person who should probably avoid those opportunities to pastorally care for other people. This is just who I am now. I've seen this at work over and over in people's lives. Once they cross some line, it just gets incorporated into how they see themselves. Now I'm just a person who steals from the boss, or I'm a person who cheats on my husband, or ignores my kids, or lies to my friends, or quits praying a long time ago. And once it's incorporated into my identity, it feels like there's no turning back. If it's what you do that defines you, then I guess this is just who I am now. One of the things that I appreciate the most about Jesus, though, and by extension, the original Christian faith, is how counterintuitive his way of operating was. Let me tell you what I mean. During his Last Supper with his followers, yes, that Last Supper, he started predicting that each one of them would eventually bail on him. He said that it would be kind of like a test from the devil. And then he singled out one of his closest friends, Peter, and said, "But I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail, and when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers." And Peter gets all offended at this, and he says, "I'll never abandon you. I'll go to prison for you. I'll die for you." Little did he know that over the course of the next 8 hours that night, he would lose that confidence to the point where he wouldn't even admit to a middle school girl that he knew Jesus. And later, when a group of people pushed him on it, he swore up and down that he didn't care whether Jesus lived or died. He completely bailed on Jesus. If it's what we do that defines us, then Peter's a deserter. Jesus predicted that Peter would deny knowing him at least 3 times, and that's exactly what he did. And right after the 3rd time, they made eye contact across the courtyard. Jesus had just been pummeled, and Peter stood at a distance. All of the eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life tell this story, and they all end with Peter leaving the courtyard weeping. I've got to imagine that he was wondering, is this who I am now? If you don't know the story of Jesus, he was crucified later on the Friday afternoon and then rose from the dead on the Sunday morning on that same weekend. But the next time that we see Peter and Jesus have a conversation, it was over breakfast on the beach. And Jesus restored their obviously damaged relationship. I've got to imagine that of all the things that would be tough to come back from, swearing you don't know your best friend while other people beat him half to death, and then swearing to God above that you don't care whether he lives or dies at least 3 times, that'd be a tough one to come back from. But here's why this story matters so much to me. Jesus expected both his failure and restoration. I mean, while he was predicting the denial, he said to Peter, when you turn back, encourage your brothers. When you turn back. In other words, I know this is going to happen. I know that you're going to cross that line. I know that you're going to fail. And so when you turn back, because listen, you can always turn back. Just because you cross that line, just because you failed, just because you screwed this all up, it doesn't mean that this is who you are now. The question is, will you turn back? There's some fascinating research out of a lab at NYU on meditation. They've researched how meditation can improve a person's ability to focus. But what's fascinating is that the meditation doesn't enhance your focus directly, meaning your ability to never get distracted. No, it strengthens your ability to return to focus from distraction. It's not about avoiding all distraction, it's about strengthening your ability to turn back to focus from each distraction. Friends, following Jesus is not about a life free from failure, mistakes, or regrets. Following Jesus doesn't mean living a life that never crosses the line. Instead, it's a life of daily turning back. Whatever line you've crossed, this isn't who you are now. You can always turn back. Jesus' expectation was both for the failure and the restoration. Now, it's possible that to enter the restoration process, there's going to be some pain involved. I mean, if you read the story of Peter's restoration, there was some significant discomfort. And it's possible that the people you've heard along the way won't be as gracious as Jesus. But better to decide, I'm a person who works to restore the things I've broken, rather than to settle for, I'm a person who breaks things, and I guess this is just who I am now. And if you're a Jesus follower, this is what our faith is all about, not perfection, but restoration. Jesus came to restore humanity's relationship with God, and he's inviting us to live that out in our relationships with each other. I think that's why Jesus said to Peter at dinner, when you turn back, encourage your brothers. Don't forget that last part, encourage your brothers. You know, if I've learned anything over the last decade of doing this, it's that people need encouragement. They need to feel seen and heard and understood. They need to be loved and built up and affirmed. But that encouragement just isn't the same when it comes from somebody who projects perfection, who's never failed and who's never broken a relationship or screwed up financially or crossed a line morally. That encouragement will always hit different when it comes from somebody who gets it, from somebody who knows what it's like to cross a line and not just ruin moments, but ruin relationships. Somebody who knows what it's like to cross the line, but then turn back. Peter spent the rest of his life leading people to turn back and work for restoration. He went from being an uneducated fisherman to watching his best friend get beaten to death and then stand at a distance as he died. I mean, of all the things to not turn back from. What's crazy is that Peter actually then ended up helping to lead a movement that would eventually change the world. I mean, some people hold him up as the first pope. Some people built an unbelievably opulent building in his memory. I mean, we're still talking about Peter today. Friends, I don't know what line you've crossed. I don't know what you broke or what mistake you made. But I do know that this doesn't have to be who you are now. You can always turn back. So you lost focus. It was never about avoiding all distraction or all failure. It's about turning back. So what do? Is it a phone call that you need to make? Is it an apology that you need to script out? A wrong that you need to right? Something taken that needs to be returned? What does turning back look like? What does restoration look like? And if you're not sure and you want to talk it through, send us a message. All of our information is in the description below. I would love to talk with you to help you on your restoration journey. Jesus loved you so much that he thought it was worth giving his own life so that you could be restored to God. And now he's inviting you to work for restoration with others. I mean, Peter went from denial to pope. Who knows what hangs in the balance of your decision to turn back today? Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.